I started Race Talks in 2011, and one of the factoids that helped me to start Race Talks was the fact that by 2040 there will be more people of color than there are white people in the United States. And the things that are going on right now, the violence, the fear, I saw that coming. And I thought the best way to overcome that was for us to get to know each other and start talking to each other. So that's what we do here at Race Talks. The whole idea is to get to know each other. Later in the evening, we will have a drawing for you to get to know someone specifically very well. This is a great opportunity for you to kind of check out somebody across the room that you'd like to get to know, a person who looks interesting. And we'll have a $25 drawing for someone, for the two of you to go and get something to eat at McMenamins and talk about anything except race. So that's what it is. I guess, someone pointed out that I haven't told my personal story. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about who I am. I was a social justice worker in utero. My parents were really about this. My father joined the NAACP in college when it cost 50 cents and when he would have been kicked out because it was a revolutionary organization. So I've been doing this a long time. My first awareness of me being black was when I was about 2 or 3 years old. And I remember we went shopping for Christmas gifts. And every year I bought everybody the same thing, handkerchiefs. And I was over picking out my assortment for each person. And these little white kids who looked very dirty and ragged came up and looked at me and said, "Look, Mama, there's a nigger." And I looked at them and I went over to my mother and said, "Mama, what's a nigger?" And she just about lost it. And she said, "Who said that?" So when I pointed out who the people were, she took them over there. My father had to come get her because it was about to be on. And Sharon knows exactly what I'm talking about because I've known Sharon since we were in the crib together, and her mom was the same way. So it was about to be on, except my dad intervened. And then we skipped forward to when I was about 8 years old. This was back in the time when people would go for Sunday rides after church. You get all dressed up and you go to church. And so every Sunday after dinner, we would go for a nice ride. And we had our little routine. Part of the routine was that we had to make sure that Daddy had the gun and that it was under the front seat of the car, because we were going to go riding in areas of town that you didn't see black folks. And we needed to make sure that we were safe. So we would ride around and the windows would be down and we'd have a great time where it was kind of general public places. And then I remember going to a place, and when I think of it as being like Council Crest, because I remember it had the name of the community right there out in front of it. And we drove up this little hill to go up and visit the homes and see what people's houses look like and get decorating ideas and such. And after we had gone about a block, there were men who were starting to come and stand out in front of their house. And they were coming out to the sidewalk and standing there. And then I noticed that all of these white men were standing in front of their houses. And I looked up the one side street, they were coming out to stand outside there too. And the wives and the kids were at the door being shushed and pushed back into the house and peering out of the door or peering out of the curtains. And I remember being very frightened by that. And my dad just said, "Everybody's doors are locked, right?" "Yeah." Because we always made sure our doors were locked before we went into a white neighborhood. And we also made sure that only about this much air was coming into the car. It didn't matter how hot it was. So he had the gun, the windows were up, the doors were locked. And I remember being frightened saying, "We need to go back, Daddy, this isn't safe." And he said, "Our taxes paid for these streets. We're not doing anything wrong, and we're gonna drive through this neighborhood." And I was terrified. Terrified. Why are they coming out? Why are they looking at us? Why are they doing that? And they stayed there until we went through, and then we turned around, and then we came back down a side street. And I guess the people who were on the side street that I had noticed before didn't think we would be coming back down. So they went back into the house. But that stuck with me. And that's what living in America is like for a person of color. You're not welcome. You're afraid. You need to arm yourself because you don't know what's going to happen. And I just read on Facebook the other day that one of the people who works downtown came in on Max, and a guy was hollering racial epithets at her, and then another guy had pulled his knife out and was on his lap, fell off his lap. I had somebody show me their knife downtown not long ago. So this is what being in America is like. This is what it's like for a person of color. And while we might not talk about it all the time, it's always there. And it's not fun. So what we need are allies. We need people who understand that we're just people like you are. That Maslow's hierarchy of needs are the same things that we need. And so we would like for you to join us in helping to make sure that everyone has privilege. We don't want to take away your white privilege. We just want some too. So I was told to quit telling people to sit back and relax. I'm not going to tell you that because I understand this is not a relaxing kind of thing. But we do have wonderful speakers here tonight. And we have a co-sponsor, Multnomah County Commissioner Loretta Smith. I don't know why I almost said Loretta Jones, whoever Loretta Jones is. Thank you, concussion. Commissioner Loretta Smith is going to give you a few words about why we're doing this speech about women in the workplace. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. How you all doing? Thank you so much, Ms. Donna Maxey. Thank you, Race Talks, for being courageous enough to have this conversation about women of color in the workplace. I'm Loretta Smith, and I'm in my second term as a Multnomah County Commissioner here in Portland, Oregon. And I am so proud and honored to be able to represent all of you. So thank you for coming tonight. This series was actually inspired by the Black Women at Work hashtag. They launched it this spring. The hashtag provided a forum for women of color to share their stories about what it's like to work in America as a Black or a brown woman of color. And while we're joining forces with Race Talks for this launch, we are planning to hold 3 additional forums around this particular issue. My staff, they have some save the date flyers that provide dates and contact information for the rest of the series. Can my staff raise their hands? Elizabeth, Giovanni, Tatiana, yes. They have all the flyers for the upcoming events. But the goal of this series in particular is to provide a forum to continue the conversation that was started by the Black Women at Work hashtag. I thought we needed to kind of make this a little personal. We needed to make this local. When this hashtag started trending, there was a certain level of relief that I felt. It was almost as if someone is finally saying something. It was as if someone finally said out loud, institutional and structural racism is real in America. The condescending and disrespectful treatment that women of color face on a daily basis is real. As a quick reminder, the hashtag was born out of 2 incidents that happened on the same day. 2 Black women, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, y'all know who she is, right? Yes. And reporter April Ryan So let's talk about one of those particular events. Back in March, conservative TV host Bill O'Reilly said, in response to a floor speech being given by the Congresswoman, "I didn't hear a word," blip, Waters said. "I was looking at the James Brown wig. If we have a picture of James, it's the same wig." Really? Really? And what it did for me when I was listening to that, as he talked about the most prominent Black woman in Congress, he was saying he was so distracted by our hair. Now, we're women of color. We all have different types of hair, different textures, different colors, but it is ours. And we don't have a right to talk about other folks' hair. The congressman was given a floor speech about the state of the nation and the role African Americans should be playing in fighting for our democracy. He minimized this, marginalized what she was saying, and made a joke about it. Needless to say, he doesn't have a job right now, right? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Later, in response to O'Reilly, Congresswoman Waters said in her statement, "I'd like to say to women out there everywhere, don't allow these right-wing talking heads, these dishonorable people to intimidate you or scare you. Be who you are. Do what you do. And let us get on with discussing the real issues of this country. When a woman stands up and speaks truth to power, there will be attempts to put her down." And those of you in this room, if you've experienced that, raise your hand. For those of you with brown and Black skin, the offhanded, rude comments, it was nothing new, was it? Nothing new. What was new was it happened on TV to a congresswoman, the most senior Black woman in the Congress. Wrong woman to mess with, that's all I'm gonna say, I know her. We know now that no person of color is safe from this sort of degrading rhetoric, regardless of one's economic status, their political standing, or their visibility in the community. These microaggressions are tossed around regularly and often. What these incidents do was to provide a platform like we have today. And I saw this as an opportunity. I saw this as an opportunity to share, to listen, and to educate. I want to focus on the educate piece for just a minute. I think it is absolutely vital that we have white allies who are willing to listen and to hear and to stand up. I think it's also important, though, that our allies understand that they can be really, really good people and yet not realize their own biases. That is why the very nature of racism today is just a little bit different. That is what institutional and structural racism, that's what that looks like. It's using the processes and the procedures of bureaucracy to implement one's bias, okay? Institutional racism is implicit by its very nature, making it especially hard to recognize. It is not as though there are signs over the water fountains anymore, or their segregated lunch counters. You know, I was just thinking about this. Just a few decades ago, I would have had to enter this building through the back door. We don't have that anymore, but we have something just as dangerous, just as lethal in terms of structural and institutional racism. Here's what's important for you to understand. You can decry what happened in Charlottesville, but still perpetuate racist behaviors in the workplace. However, what we're going to learn about tonight is the way to battle this is to talk about it. The way to battle this is by identifying it. The way to battle this is by sounding out about it and having a platform like we have here today. And that's why we're here tonight. And that's why we will continue to have this very courageous conversation in 3 more forums and beyond. I want to thank the panelists here today. Where are all my panelists? I want to thank them for being brave to come out and share your personal stories. I commend every one of you here in the audience who has come to listen, to hear, and to learn. And I look forward to the beginning of what will be an ongoing and very important conversation. So thank you so much for coming here tonight. God bless.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Smith. Want to remind you that there's an evaluation form here, and on the back, after our speakers speak, there is we have the small group discussions, and normally we have facilitators, but I don't know if we have any facilitators in the room tonight. Do we have any of those folks? We have 1 or 2. So you can facilitate at your table, and we have some guidelines for those folks who will step up and be the facilitator, so thank you. Also, Commissioner Smith has a photographer here tonight, and he's going to be taking pictures. If you would prefer to not have your picture taken, make sure you let him know. All right? Mr. Photographer, you want to stand up so they can see who you are? So, if you prefer not to have your picture taken, let him know. All righty. So, could our speakers please come forward? While they're coming forward, I will also point out that at your table is a participant sign-in sheet on the table. And please make sure that everyone signs in tonight. And additionally, at your table is a beautiful little purse. We work off of donations, and we like to pay our speakers, so please make sure that you put something in there. If you were to go somewhere and to hear speakers like this, you'd probably pay $30 to $50. So don't worry about it, just go ahead and put it in the envelope. So. Thank you. Tonight we are minus a speaker. Danita Fry is ill, so we're sending Danita her prayers. But as an opportunity, after we finish with the speakers share their prepared remarks, then we're going to do a little riff where they talk back and forth with each other about whatever catches their fancy. So sit back, relax. We have 3 amazing women. Sharon Gary-Smith, raise your hand, Sharon. And Sharon is the retired executive director of McKenzie River Gathering Foundation. We have Vicki Nakashima, who is the retired State of Oregon Department of Human Services Multicultural Health Director. And we have Linda Castillo, who I assumed I didn't know your title, Linda, so I called you the coordinator of the New Portlander program. So they're going to tell you about themselves. I usually don't have folks introduce themselves because if they weren't really on it and wonderful, they wouldn't be up there. So sit back and enjoy.
Yes, there was supposed to be an exercise emphasize where it was momentary lights out. So I just wanted to mention that so I could get on the stool. Which is a perfect way for us to start. I think some of the remarks of the commissioner, some of the information that's contained in the flyer and the advertisements, and certainly for me, Sharon Gary-Smith, a African-American, vertically challenged sense of myself is always higher than my height. That was necessary and it was appropriate given the fact that I was born and raised in this city, in this state, which had its own alternative facts about who I was and who I could be. But I was informed and schooled and encouraged and expected to succeed because I'm the daughter of a Tuskegee man and a mama from the showing state of Missouri who came west. And they said, anyone who doesn't understand your facility for speech, for thought, your creativity, your smarts, they are confused. And I absolutely adopted that as the mantra that carried me through the public school system and on to higher education. And I say that not as a challenge, but I think the fact that I arrived in the places I did was because I did not believe I could not or should not be granted the opportunity, despite the reality of racism, despite gender and sexism, despite assumptions about who I was, what my history meant, and how could you go from slavery to success in 60 seconds. That is a short narrative of a larger, more powerful culture and community that I come from, and I hope that I can share that with you this evening. So my arrival as an executive director in philanthropy, which is the last bastion of white privilege, domination, and maleness. And it's because it's about money and power. If we talk about how that money was acquired for so many foundations, whether it's the Rockefellers or the Ford, I say they were robber barons, they were slaveholders, and they were thieves. So that acquisition of money from people, the resources were the workers. And so when you look at philanthropy, who gives and who gets, there are a lot of negative assumptions about who is a recipient, always people of color, poor people, and assumptions about who are givers, which is always white people, and not just white people, white males. But the truth of the matter is people of color have the highest giving per capita of any group, and African Americans lead that. Our churches have the benevolence of us because they give back to us a sense of respect. So that's why I ended up in a career that ended up being in, I wanted to manage, control, and decide where money went, lots of money. Because we all have learned how to manage with money. But how to give it away, it's not rocket science. And yet if you look at boards, if you look at trustees, if you look at staffs of foundations, even those that consider themselves progressive, I knew I needed to be there, joining in collaboration, talking about what could be different, and funding those who are breaking the systems of racism, that are embedded with racism. That includes our local government, our state, our education systems, our housing. All of those are affected by race and place. I wanted to be in a position to not only have the conversation, but put money on it, which has value in America. But my road to that is a little black girl, the eldest of 4 daughters of Frederick Douglass Gary, Jr. And in the public schools here in Portland with my classmate, but really my mate, Donna, I learned early what it meant to assert yourself, to see yourself as more, to believe that you had just such undefinable options, that it wasn't a privilege for me to go into class with white kids. It was an opportunity for them to learn something more too. That's what my parents, that was what came to us every night with the food. To the question, my mother, how did I watch women and did my mother work? My father, this Tuskegee man, he believed the mantra, "Go west, young man, go west." He didn't know they didn't mean him and his friends, educated black men who came west because they didn't want to go up south. That's what people call Chicago, Philly, New York. They sought better, they got worse, often. They came west with skills and training and certificates and were asked to do menial, do things that were so aligned with what we assumed were subhumans. And he said that was not what he trained for. So he was a very gentle, quiet, fine, agitating man. My mother is the baby girl of 5. She was unbought and unbossed. She came to Oregon seeking an opportunity to get out of the plains. She wanted to try to see what it would be like to live away from the family and to be able to run her own world the way she saw fit. And because they met up, she had her eye on him, she said, early, as did many others, but my mother was a tough little somebody. She had plans, and together they decided as they raised a family, they were going to imbue in their children, all girls, about who you are and whose you are. And on the basis of that, I was the first one to enter into the world of public schools, to be placed in classes, to be accelerated, and people said something must be wrong. They had to repeat tests because I couldn't test better than. They had to complete assignments again. Teachers had to question whether or not I'd been coached. That is the experience for so many who look like me and others of color. The questioning, the assuming, the not believing, the asking us to prove it, that our presence, our humanity, has value. So I went to school armed with this sense of myself from my family. And those who saw that as odd, an intact African-American family. Think about what you've heard about our history. We were all women. People asked my dad, how was it like that to be in a family with 5 women and a dog who sat by my mother because she bought the food, although it was his dog. And he said, it is an unapologetic matriarchy. And that was in a clapback to Daniel Patrick Moynihan. That we do not emasculate, we elevate, we raise, we come to community and solidarity. That was my real teaching experience that I bring to you. So everything that I wanted to do, from a teacher, I wanted to be a teacher. Because my mother was a teacher, not in the formal way. My mother corrected every paper. My mother, you could not write home from college. She would red mark your letter. But what that said to me is she's deciding the world that I'm in, not them, not others. And that was powerful juice, nectar for my soul and for my sisters and for those we were in community with. Oregon State University, 8 black women, 13,000 students. They were accustomed to black men because they're athletes. Now I consider them student athletes, including my husband at that time. I met him on campus. They were accustomed to them because they performed, they ran, they jumped, they caught balls. They were not accustomed to black women, especially one who came to school not on scholarship but on parents' checks. So the experience of being in a place where I could stop traffic because people couldn't believe I was in a store handling clothes. All of those experiences, Donna just told you about the experience of going up into a neighborhood council crest and being assumed to be the outsider, the interlopers, the ones who are dangerous or criminal, when we fear what we know is the danger. And I'd like to pass to my colleagues so that we can go back. That just gives you a sense of the unbought and unbossed. And I absolutely honor Maxine Waters. I'm always reclaiming my time, and I want to give time to them.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. This is a thrill. It really is to be part of Race Talks. I am a third generation Japanese American. My grandparents immigrated here close to 1905, 1900. My parents were born here, and I was born here. My parents, during the World War II, were interned. It turned out that I came by some of the same civil rights activism through my father, not my mother, who was quite not always proud. I don't know if you've heard the saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what Japanese Americans believed. And when they were interned in World War II, they had to disavow, even though they were US citizens and born here and educated here, they had to disavow any connection with Japan in order to be released from camp. They also could not return more than 150 miles to the coast, even though they had left Seattle, where my father was in architecture school at the University of Washington. And they had just built a new house on Beacon Hill and lost everything that they owned because camp only allowed you to take what you could carry or what you could entrust to somebody, not knowing if you would come back. I moved here in 1967, and if you walk around the halls of this school, there's a room named after Martha B. Jordan. And Martha B. Jordan gave me my first job when I moved to Portland in 1967. And I remember her and honor her and have great admiration for her. In my state government career, one of the most influential people I knew was Bobby Gary. She was on the board for the senior citizen, for the, gosh, I cannot name the number of boards she was on, but she made such an impact in the state, and she was an inspiration, because even today, state government is not as diverse as we wish it was. I spent most of my career in state government, and I'm very proud of that, but I started believing that state government wasn't a great place to go work. You know, maybe it didn't have the image I wanted it to have, or maybe it was a place you went to be safe, and that just didn't quite agree with me. I always had a plan B, and the plan B could have been picking strawberries, because I lived in the country, or finding something else very quickly, because I may not fit very well in state government. But I did fit fairly well, and that was thanks to some mentors and people who stood by me and encouraged me throughout my career, and I had a great career. Now, when you talk about career path, I think I'm most proud of the fact I didn't have a path. I wanted to go where when I got up in the morning, it moved me, and if I was around people I admired. I remember spending 6 months on loan to Nike during my career, and I started an internship program that Marietta Smith was one of the first interns at Nike for their internship program. But I remember going to Nike to help them with some diversity initiatives back in 1990, I think. And one of the things I told Nike is that we need to go buy a booth at the Blacks in Government Conference to recruit employees of color, particularly African American employees. And I had read an article when I was in state government about how 90% of the African American professionals worked in the public sector or nonprofit sector. They weren't working in the public sector. So when I was challenged by Nike, I said, if 90% of the African American female professionals, and also a very high number of other professionals of color, work in the public sector, then that's where we should go recruit. Nike didn't think that was the greatest idea, but they bought my booth to go to Blacks in Government on behalf of Nike. I'm sure it was the only time they ever went to Blacks in Government, but they did go there. So I worked in many different agencies. I retired in 2005 from the Office of Multicultural Health as the director. I had no background in public health, but the state had, the governor at the time was an ER doctor, John Kitzhaber, and he wanted a task force and an initiative on racial disparities. And he asked if I would go and work with the community to do that. So I did that for 5 years. I later worked as a volunteer managing Partners in Diversity. So if any of you have heard of Say Hey, then that's how that got started. And if you haven't been there, you need to come in November, promise me. It's going to be at OMSI. It'll be sponsored by OMSI. So look at our website, partnersindiversity.org. So I'm going to pass it on and we can talk some more.
Not a positive attraction there. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Castillo, and as is often the tradition when we talk about ourselves, first we have to talk about our ancestors, and so thank you for sharing your stories. And for us, you know, that's part of our Native traditions, part of our Latino traditions. So my great-great-grandmother, she came over, my great-grandmother, she came over from Zacatecas, Mexico, at the turn of the century, at the age of 12, with her then husband who was in his 20s. We won't talk about that and don't mention it to DHS. But it was a different time, right? It was a very different time. You know, people came together for a lot of different reasons. She also came with a nanny, so that was really interesting. So she came over, 12 years old, older husband, he worked the copper mines, she was at home learning traditions and, you know, not raising any children until the age of 18. And at that point, she only raised one daughter. And that one daughter, my grandmother, went on to have 12 children. Actually 14 children to this day. So baby, my mom, had to really deal with a lot over those years. And her understanding of what it was to be a mother was really kind of a stressful kind of experience. Very traditional kind of understanding of what it is in terms of Latino households. You care for the children, you care for families, your needs come last to the rest of everyone else in the family. So she was doing a lot of caretaking, even as a very young child. But then the family then moved from the Middle Valley to San Jose, where I was born and raised. And at that point, she had not finished high school, and she went on to work in a restaurant. So she left as a junior, just as she became the beauty queen in her high school, left, and then came to work in restaurants in San Jose. And then met my father, who was from Mexico City, went on to have their life, and then me, and then my sister, who's now 8 years younger than I am. Life was very hard for Mexicans, even California, even though there's a lot of us there, it's still very difficult. My mother then remarried, and my stepfather, who's from Michoacan, which is more in the central part of Mexico, really did a lot of field work and farm work over the years, and was one of those individuals who's subjected to a lot of racism and a lot of activities that these days still continue. Like, for example, he'd work a whole month, and then the owner would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any money to pay you." So of course that was a huge impact to our family and led to a lot of, you know, very, very difficult times. There was also during that period of time Operation Wetback, so he was deported and then would return. and because he had family obligations and to take care of us and to take care of family in Mexico as well. So there were a lot of difficult times. We had a struggle. But very interestingly, my mom then decided she was going to study circuit boards. And here we were in San Jose, which is, you know, the Silicon Valley. So she was an early pioneer in Silicon Valley, working circuit boards, which, you know, were for computers and TVs and all of that. And then my father had also had enough of field work and started to work at Ford Motor Companies and eventually became a supervisor and then manager at Ford Motors Company. So there was, you know, incrementally over time, some changes and some integration and some growth for our family, not only for them professionally, but economically. So we saw some good things happening. When I became conscious of race, because we were always kind of in the bubble in the Bay Area, a lot of Latinos, a lot of folks, Asia Pacific Islanders, a lot of African Americans in our community. And so I never really felt anything about race till I went to Mexico. And we go to Mexico every year. And there's this term in Mexico where if you're not from there, they call you pocha. So you're not from there, but you know, and so you're half and half. But for me, I really always felt very Mexican, and so it was a very confusing term for me. And so it really kind of put a name and a place to this experience of having one foot there and one foot here, and kind of creating a third culture for yourself, because you're not completely Mexican, but you're not completely American, but you're something else. And so a lot of my friends and I really created this third culture for ourselves, and at that time, in the 70s, you know, it was a lowrider kind of experience, so that was part of my culture, and it wasn't gang related or anything, it was just definitely a culture and an experience and a way of dressing and a way of being to claim our own identity, and that was really important for us. And during that period of time, you know, my brothers, or rather my brothers, my aunts and uncles, they were struggling with a variety of things and dealing with issues of poverty and drug addiction. And I remember in those early years, as my parents worked day shift and night shift, and I'd come home, I often came home and would watch Merv Griffin. Everyone remember Merv Griffin, Phil Donahue? And thought, you know, a wonderful career would be perhaps something in journalism. And so that was one of my early experiences. I wanted to be a journalist and write, and thought about doing that for a long time. But then I found that I was kind of the counselor for our family. People would come to me and tell me their issues and their stories and their challenges. And then I started reading Freud and Jung and thought, okay, here's another adventure in traveling in the world, is traveling in the mind and the experience of our community. And looking around and seeing there isn't anyone in our community who's a mental health professional, who's Latino, who understands our community. And so I thought, here is a really great lane. This is something of interest. This is something that I know is really needed. And I felt really passionate about it. So that in my teens really informed my career direction to go into mental health, and my goal was to become a psychologist. So I went to Santa Clara University and got a bachelor's in clinical psychology and then a master's in clinical psychology, and that was my role. And I was going to go on to get my PhD. But as things invariably happen, you know, you meet somebody, you have children, things happen. So I didn't pursue that path, but I did pursue that work and worked as a therapist with Spanish-speaking families, because I really saw the need for our community to have someone who understood that third culture that our families are experiencing, where the parents are saying, you're not Mexican enough anymore, you're leaving the traditions, what are you doing? You're becoming too American. And the children are saying, you know, gosh darn it, I'm living in this place, give me a break. I need to be able to do some things that you're not allowing me to do. This, you know, there's a traditional grip on me, what should I do? And so to be able to work with those families in two languages and help them navigate those things and negotiate some things that would make for a peaceful household was really, really gratifying for me. And I did that during a period of time where I was in Vancouver, and one of the people that saw the work that I was doing was Leslie Goodlow Baldwin, who was working at Multnomah County. I don't know if some folks know her, but she's been a long time in the mental health field and now at the city of Portland. And she had recommended me for a position at Multnomah County to lead the child mental health program. And then I was also recommended by Clara Padilla Andrews, who is also a long-standing, person in the community who does a lot of community justice work. And so those two ladies really helped kind of pave the way for me coming into the county and working there for 17 years. I know that just seems incredible, but yeah, I was there for 17 years, working in the mental health programs and then in the Sun schools. And in those programs, finding those individuals who would also provide mentorship and support was a little few and far between. And there were a few women who were in leadership positions that I really saw as mentors, and then other individuals who I would just gravitate to. It was a kind of a lonely kind of field in the local government to find those mentors and those supporters. So when you found someone who was really could be your champion and really could listen and open up their office door and you could sit in there and talk with them, that was really wonderful to help kind of provide you with some support and a playbook about what to do. So that was the period of time at the county. And so I think, we often have these experiences of what do we do next. And for me, mental health field has always been a really gratifying area, but I found what I was actually doing was capacitating and building leadership with folks. So throughout my career now, it's really been about community building and building leadership in community and really providing an opportunity to capacitate folks in whatever way it might be. And my most recent passion is really now preparing people for public service, to be in elected positions. Because you know the old saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we really have to be making some decisions because a lot of things are happening in our communities that are this structural institutional racism. And unless we start to find ways to combat it by understanding from the other perspective, it's not going to change. So just this last month, we had our first for Latinos by Latinos public service training. And we had 30 individuals from throughout the state come to prepare them for running for public office or to support them in public office. So that's where we're at this point. And that's really one of those ways to begin to make that change.
So I asked these ladies a bunch of questions about mentors and about being at work. And it's so important for us who are the elders to understand what has happened in the workplace. I know from my own personal experience, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be entitled, I Don't Have to Be the First or Only Anything Ever Again in Life. And it is a lonely position to be in, and it's difficult. How many people here, I just want to show of hands, have had incidences at work because of your ethnicity? Okay, lots of hands. How many of people here have had incidences at work because of your gender? Oh, even more. So, and I'm not going to ask the question I really want to ask. How many of us are perpetuated stuff? So don't raise your hand. So I just would like for these ladies to kind of talk about, we know that we've all been through things. How have you dealt with that? How have you turned that situation around? How have you managed to, I know for myself, it was a real balancing act when there was a lot of sexual politics. I was working in California state government, and I mean, these people were sleeping with everybody. And the trick was, how do you turn that down? How do you keep your job? And how do you not have to play that game? So you're juggling a whole lot more things. And I just want to know, how did you juggle those things? How did you take those lemons and turn them into lemonade?
It's interesting. I was thinking about mentorship, and I would say that there are a lot of folks in my experience who would talk about how difficult it was to be at the top. And an unnamed individual who used to run the Port of Portland. So if you go back a little bit, you would locate him, stood on the top floor of the Lloyd building, gazing out over all the land, and Lloyd Center looks very different now, but still it's quite a wide gaze. With his hands behind him, I think that was supposed to be in a thoughtful, kind of Confucius-like moment he was having in the office. And he said, I just don't understand why a little woman like you wants to be at the top. It is so lonely up here. This is where you cue the violin. My response was, one in my head, he's gotta be kidding me. I said, if there were more like me up here, not only would you not be lonely, but you wouldn't be the one at the top. Now, the fact that I said it and he was stunned by it, I have used him as a mentor. When someone told me not to be on the road, despite the fact that they were on it, I knew that was a road worth pursuing. When someone discouraged me because it would be so lonely to move up, it's not fun on the bottom. So the fact that I use that negative implication to actually fuel me, why would he discourage me from being in a position where he is, that everything he surveys, he runs? That's the opposite of mentorship and thinking about and nurturing and seeing your talents, innate skills, wanting to believe that I could see something in you and I could get joy out of it. That was, I always reference him because I was the first person who looked like me who came into the Port of Portland, and I was in public affairs. They asked me what did I want to choose, the community. I wanted Terminal 6 because it's industrial, that's revenue generation, and that's where all the cars came in, the Toyotas and the Hondas. So there was lots of activity at that time. It was booming. I wanted to actually be able to talk about the story of economic development. And he thought it'd be hard out there because I'm the first one they ever hired that looked like me. Someone's got to be the first. So what I'm saying is I did not let the assumptions that we're going to try to discourage you from being here if that's really what I wanted. And I absolutely wanted to write and talk about economic development and the importance of the port to this community. And I wanted his job. I don't think it's wrong for women to want a job, a room in the corner, to have the ability to make decisions. We're collaborative people. I wanted to be able to define things, to offer ideas. I do not think that it is inappropriate to pursue the top. Too many of us know what the bottom looks like.
Well, I would like to make an observation that probably stems from my early days in Portland, and that is because the population of people of color is so small in this state that you really need to develop alliances and networks of people that go beyond just Japanese Americans or Asians. If you go, I went to the Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber dinner this week, and every community organization, advocacy organization that had money to buy tickets, or organizations that support diversity in the workplace or community, they were there. It didn't matter if they're African American, Native American, Asian, they were there. And I know many people move here from somewhere else and they go to an Urban League dinner and they say, gosh, if you go to an Urban League dinner in Chicago, there may be a white elected official, but it's predominantly African American. If you only count on one community in this state to support the efforts of the community, so now I think it's tremendously important that we all view it that way, that we need to have our own identity and community, but we also need to support one another. And I think that's really critical. And my one aha, recently there was a book published about the Black Panthers in Portland during the 60s. And this is an example of that coming true. I was on the board of the Sickle Cell Anemia Foundation because I was a volunteer in the Free People's Clinic. And when that book was being written by an author who is at Ohio State, can't Ford, who headed the Black Panthers, told him he should interview me. So now that's my claim to something. I didn't burn anything down, but I am in the book about a very interesting part of our community. And I don't think there are too many places in this country that I would have been part of the Black Panther movement.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here because
Can you do a quick history lesson?
Because Vicki doesn't know
Yes.
that two of the progenitors of the Black Panther Party were Asians. And so they were at every table. I forget their names. Do you know their names, Sharon?
I can't.
But it was a man, one was a man and one was a woman. So the Black Panther Party had Asians in it, okay? So you were just carrying on the tradition.
How many of you are familiar with the school lunch programs that are always touted by the USDA? You know that the Panthers started that. The free clinics, the community clinics, where doctors provided time to people who didn't have before the Oregon Health Plan. Black Panthers. Make sure you know facts versus alternative versions of the truth. They did some stuff.
No, I absolutely agree. It's in collaborations and in coalitions that we're going to get anything done. I think for me, in local government, the experience that I had of any kind of discrimination or racism came from the very top. I remember there was a period of time where I was really trying to navigate my career to like learn all the rules and then I could break them and then, you know, keep moving. And I really had a wonderful mentor who was helping me kind of move forward in my career. And I got an opportunity to get an interim placement in the mental health division, overseeing 65 staff who were doing involuntary commitments and hospitalizations and the emergency services and the phone banks and all of that. And it was a really wonderful experience. But the individual that we were working with at that time was in private conversations, and sometimes not so private conversations, talking about the mud people and what were the mud people doing. And so this whole way of seeing our community was really very, very disturbing. And here's someone who's supposedly a healer and a caretaker in our community. Not acceptable at all. Luckily, we were able to move that person into another place so that he wouldn't be actually providing any services. But these are the kinds of things that we face. People who are supposed to be taking care of us who have these ideas about who we are, have a lot of implicit bias about the experiences of who we are, and projecting those in very conscious and unconscious ways. And so these are the things that we have to keep being mindful of and looking at and figuring out how to move them around. I think one of the other places that we're finding, as we were talking earlier about the importance of coalitions and collaborations and bringing folks together. Recently, I'm really proud of this work that I'm doing at the city with Portland United Against Hate, and we brought a coalition of folks together to really begin to address hate in Portland. I think it's been a really ugly underbelly in Portland for a very, very long time. And now it's peaking out much more, and we're seeing a lot of horrendous experiences. Certainly the Max incident and the murder there and the attacks was just horrendous. And it just is kind of bookmarking a 30-year period with Mulugata Sarah being beaten and killed 30 years ago, and here we are again. It hasn't changed, Portland. What's going on? And so this is the place where we really need to come together and work as a coalition to begin to change this and create some programs and supports and resources so that we can really start to change the dial and start to raise consciousness in our community and have these conversations about what this really means. What is it about the other that frightens you? What is it about the other that makes you want to reject them? What is it about the other that is really actually within you and you're afraid to face? And so I think these are the questions that we need to keep asking each other and do it in coalition. Governmental coalitions, interfaith coalitions, communities of color, coming together and having these very honest conversations. And really, and some groups might need to have their own conversations about this. I'm really glad to see this race talk that you're going to be having in the coming week for the communities, the white community, to have their conversation about what is it in terms of your role and responsibility to have these conversations amongst yourselves and with us in such a way. We're really at a point that we're very tired of feeling the burden and no benefit of having to explain things to people. Why are we the way we are? Why is it this way? Why is it that way? And so I'm really welcoming this opportunity for folks to really take that step back and say, okay, where is my responsibility and what is my part in promoting and continuing this experience that we have in our community? So I think this is really wonderful that we're doing this.
I just wanted, I forgot to mention, you know, as I was doing my little speech thing there, I forgot to mention that next month, October 10th, the topic is White America, Become an Ally Through Education and Help Dismantle Racism. And that was started around the concept that Cameron Whitten, you all know who Cameron Whitten is. He ran for mayor, he did the hunger strike, all that stuff, African-American male. And people, he said something about he was no longer going to be answering questions for people, for white people particularly. And folks went crazy. Well, Cameron won't answer my questions anymore, and I don't know why he's not answering my questions, and how am I gonna learn about race if he doesn't tell me? And I had to get on Facebook and say, we didn't come here born knowing this stuff. We had to educate ourselves. So go educate yourself. We had to learn about this. And so next month we're having Randy Blazak, who is with the Coalition Against Hate, Sam Sachs, who has the No Hate Zone. Go on, Sam, raise your hand. There he is back there. And Cameron Whitten is going to speak, and also Rebecca Greenwich, who has developed and teaches a course about how to be a white ally. And so, and in the future, Race Talks and Rebecca are going to be uniting to work up a curriculum. And this next year, I'm going to get a paycheck this next year. I'm so excited. The first time in 7 years. We haven't got all our grants yet, but we're working on it. And we're getting the money to do these programs so that we can do trainings and get the education, so we can have allies, so people can start having these conversations. Because a lot of people don't talk to each other. They don't have discussions. I mean, if I heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. You're the first black person I ever talked to. Okay. So, we're gonna make it so that it becomes the norm rather than the exception. So I'm gonna give the mic back and ask these lovely ladies to say some parting words before you go into your discussion groups. And I got some zingers of questions for you there. I expect to see everybody's hair standing up on their head tonight. Oh, and before I forget, Jan, where are you? Jan Elfers. Okay, so I belong to a group called the Beloved Community. It is the most interracial group that I have ever been in. It's interracial, interreligious, and we are doing a forum at the First United Methodist Church downtown, Southwest Jefferson, and the date is September 24th from 4 to 6. 4 to 6. Okay, so expect to see you there. And so we're talking about Beloved Community comes from Dr. King, and we hope to see you there. So with that, lovely ladies, say something.
I'm not a contrarian usually, but and Don and I know that we can have a place where we want to move forward. What I would encourage is that Portland is literally the last holdout around talk. Loves to talk, over talk, process talk. Talk has its place, but my mother used to say it's only chatter till you put wheels on it. And so I'm really asking you, look around this room. Who's in this room tonight? I've come to Donna's Race Talks before. The majority in this room, I'm gonna take a chance, is white. Come to be informed, to think, to learn. I want to encourage you to not just be allies who have a conversation. We need accomplices. We need folks who are willing to sacrifice like I do every day, to say what I see, to name it, and to go forward. I need you to take a chance. You're the dominant group, at least in your numbers. And sometimes standing up, standing in solidarity, having our backs. These incidents are happening. My daughter is fearful for me to get on the train because I speak to what I see. It should not mean I'm invalidated in my humanity or in danger from somebody who is so pitifully enmeshed in what they thought was their right to try to take me out. I need you to do more than the talk. I need you to stand up and sacrifice some of that privilege of being able to be silent. That's what I've done in the workplace. That's what I've done in my life. It is scary. We don't get to choose how we're gonna stand and confront. And if more of you would do it, I don't mean step out and take a chance and get yourself hurt, although that's always the possibility for people that look like me and other people of color, and particularly women. Now, some of us, you bring it, I'll take it. But that's not everybody, and that's another myth about women of color. I can do you well if you come the wrong way. My daughter says she's a third generation agitator and shade thrower. I say that because that's a survival tactic for people who look like me. See you, raise you one, snatch you. I need more of you to snatch and talk about it in the debrief, not to stand silently by. We are all in danger if you can't stand in solidarity. Sam has been doing it. Don is doing it. So many of you are doing it. We have got to ramp up and not just process talk. I'm done.
You know, when I think about what's been most rewarding to me in my career, it's been the opportunity to be a mentor to someone. I mean, there's nothing I'm more proud of than the people that crossed my path, that maybe I took the time to help them or to mentor them or to encourage them. And they're little stories. They're not the big stories of how many people I managed or what I did, but the tiny stories. And my mentors have been of all races. Many of the best mentors have been white males who had no understanding of me, but learned to understand me. So I just feel there's so many young people getting out of college, going into college. I'm proud to say a trustee. I didn't know what that meant, but I was Sharon. Give me a trustee title. So somebody asked me to be on the board at Marylhurst University, and I am a trustee. I said, oh goody, I'm a trustee. Now I'm trying to talk everybody into going to Marylhurst University. But I encourage you, because it's often that white mentor who takes the interest in someone who wouldn't have had that opportunity that means so much. It doesn't have to be somebody who looks just like me.
Yeah, amen to everything here. I think it's one of those opportunities for us to build different relationship with each other. It's enough with all of the microaggressions that we're experiencing in various ways, and I'll steal this from my partner in crime over at the city, Podol Catalani, who came up with micro-affections. Why don't we work on some micro-affections with each other and learn ways to really see each other and support each other and help each other find the path and the way. You know, there was many times where people have said, you know, I describe who I am and what my history is, and they're like, you're not Latina. No, you don't look Latina. And so, I mean, that's, you know, no, don't do that. And it's an opportunity for you to learn more about communities. We come in all colors and shades and shapes and eye colors and everything. And, I mean, in Mexico, there are blonde, blue-eyed Mexicanos, and there are black Mexicanos. I mean, we have the whole color spectrum, and Asian, and yeah, we have a variety. Yeah, so it's one of those things, and even there, in many places, there is the racism, there is the classism, there's things that we're all still dealing with and trying to take care of. But if we here as a community don't figure out ways to really see each other, and all the young people in the room, to really see them and talk to them and say, what are you thinking about? Where would you want to go? How can I help you? How can I be a support to you? What do you need? And treat everyone like our sons and our daughters. If we don't do that, we're not going to advance. If we keep continuing to like separate and you get to pull yourself by your bootstraps and you're on your own, we are not going to move ahead. And so that's what I challenge us to really start to treat each other as family. And I know we have these dumb rules like you can't hug and you can't wear perfume and all this crazy stuff. But I mean, there's nothing that says you can't ask permission. Can I hug you? Can I ask you this question? Can I do this thing? And then if the person says no, it's fine. But shouldn't be an excuse to not make that venture forward.
So, since this room looks like it's about 90% female, I want to say to you, please support each other. I have had so many times where other women did not support me. And sometimes it was black women. We need to love ourselves and we need to love each other. So support other women. And support anybody you see doing something that's worthwhile. We're all in this together. When that boat starts sinking, it's not going to say, oh, well, you and you will get to stay alive. That boat is going down and everybody in it is going down. So let's work to help each other do that.